A little folklore from here in Michigan, red blend, Blaufränkisch, Cab Franc, and Zweigelt. Check the color. And this is a 2023 vintage from around the Petoskey area. If I'm not mistaken, that's the new AVA tip of the mitt. Perfect. Perfect for today. Hey, Brian.
Uh, Nice shirt, man.
Yep, yours. You've got two coming.
What?
This one, and then there's another one without the elaborate stuff below our logo. And one says the two guys tasting family on the back, and the other one says two guys tasting community on the back.
All right.
And I bought a jacket and I put the coffee label on the back of the jacket, but I can't wear it because even though it's a 2X, it's still too small. So what I want
It's
to do
still
is I want to give it away to the first person that subscribes to the coffee.
mm,
If you're the first person that signs up for a subscription and you sign up for the subscription, we'll send you the jacket.
I like it.
It basically has this logo on the front, but then the coffee label on the back.
Okay. So that's going to be an interesting conversation to have, and we have
Hey there, guys.
oh,
Hey,
oh,
David,
How you doing?
doing
good. How
great,
are you?
sir.
Good.
Glad we could finally kind of sort of meet.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you consider me a stalker or not, but
No, no, no.
I've been
Actually,
stalking and
you make great comments on on past wines that you've been in contact with, like me. So it's kind of fun to see that.
yeah. So Brian, this is David. David, this is Brian.
Nice to meet you, Brian.
Nice to
Uh,
meet you too, David.
Brian, give him the short introduction of who you are.
I'm Brian Lilly. I am vice president of Chateau Chantal Winery here in Traverse City, Michigan. I'm also an importer, very small time importer. Three brands currently right now that none have over a 300 case production. I'm also a sommelier, educator at the local community college, and lead trips to wine regions through the college as well. I've been doing that for about 5 years now, and I've been in the wine business for 22. So
Oh, wow.
uh,
Yeah,
just kind of lucky to be in a space that I enjoy. So that's where I'm at.
that's great. Yeah, same kind of path. I mean, you have to kind of love the wine business really, or at least are passionate about wine to be in what we do, and it's always good to have other people in the industry to reach out to that I've never met, but we all have the same thing
Yeah,
in common. We love wine.
yeah,
Yep.
and always searching for that next hit that kind of sounds pompous, but I think as soon as you get bit by the passion bug, then you're always looking for that just amazing experience as soon as you take the first sip. And part of that is place as well. Of course, I think part of my passion has come from uh, being able to enjoy wine in the vineyard that it was grown in and being able to translate that to people that are intimidated uh, by wine in general. And so that's why Chuck and I put this piece together so that we can kind of combine worlds or give people a safe space to ask questions and build community over adult beverages in general.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's funny too because I always feel you have to be really open-minded in the wine world here because the wine industry is really changing every year, every day. You're seeing emerging wine regions. You're seeing, younger producers are coming up into the world and with all different techniques and all different ideas on how they want to create wine. So, yeah, and you just like I said, I'm always open-minded. I had a person contact me today that through LinkedIn, and they had actually saw some of my videos, and it was a winemaker in Arizona, and
Mm-hmm.
he actually said, when you come to, we would love to have you come to Arizona to taste our wines. We make pretty good wine here. And I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. I've never actually been to Arizona and never even had an Arizona wine. So, but I'm very, like, again, I'm very open-minded to, tasting wines from whatever regions, just to see the
Mm-hmm.
diversity of the wine. I actually had a chance to taste some Michigan wines too when I was in that neck of the woods. So it
Good.
was, yeah. So again, it's always fascinating to me to see, the evolution of how, especially in the United States, it's amazing, to see, North Carolina and Virginia and, and all these other areas emerging. New York
Mm-hmm.
State makes a lot of wine here. I mean, we get the Finger Lakes and we've got Long Island, and so it's and they're really good wines. I mean, you taste them
Mm-hmm.
and you say, wow, and they're unique in their own little way.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of beauty of that.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, David, because one of my um, wine memories is being out on Long Island in 1989 and
Wow.
tasting my first Long Island wine. Because in fact, my buddy's wife, I was there for something in Manhattan, and they let me stay with them out in Hampton Bays, and
Okay. Yeah.
so
Yep.
it was just an interesting take because I was used to the Michigan wineries, the Ohio wineries, and then all of a sudden I'm going to this fairly, because I want to say there weren't that many wineries at that time. I want to say there was like maybe five or more. Um,
Yeah.
I could,
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because I had when I was living in Florida, I had one of my friends, who actually lived in Boca Raton, told me that he was representing a Long Island winery, and I was kind of like, and you're right, it was like 89, 90.
yeah,
And he said, well, the owner is actually coming down to Florida. We'd like to meet you. And he was Pinder Vineyards, Pinder Winery. And he
okay,
was this doctor, Greek doctor, was one of the first, I guess, founding guys in that area to produce wine. And like you say, it's in the 80s, and there wasn't a lot going on out there. But it was still kind of experimental because I don't think they really realized what potential they had out there, what grapes, what the climate was going to be, because it's a cold climate, obviously. So you got to plant grapes that are, going to be able to weather severe
Mm-hmm.
winters, harsh winters, I should say. And it's very coastal out there too, because you're right up against the ocean, or
Mm-hmm.
at least, on the Long Island. The North Fork side, you've got the Long Island Sound. So that whole area there is windy, cold. So you could just imagine, producing wines out there is not, it's kind of challenging. But I actually have a friend who's a really top level chef here in Long Island, and he's one of the biggest supporters of Long Island wines and has done, wine events and dinners here. But at the same time, they do seem to have a following in this neck of the woods, especially, people really support him here, you know.
Yeah.
That's important. That's important to have your local community support us. It's something that Chuck hears me complain about all the time. Is that if you go to Bordeaux, Paris supports. If you go to the West Coast, Sonoma or Napa, the Bay Area supports. If you go to New York, Finger Lakes or Long Island, the metropolis supports. If you go to Michigan, Detroit supports California and French wines. And
Sure.
so we're still trying to beat it in our own state.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
it's
really the goal of what we've been trying to do here is create a platform, because you're going to be our third, basically our second non-Michigan guest.
Hmm.
And
yep.
our other guest was actually from Alabama talking about muscadine wine. So
Oh, interesting.
that lets you know
I've
how
never had.
diverse.
I've never had that, but
Yeah.
I think, but this muscadine, I've actually had a Florida muscadine. Living in Florida, they had a vineyard called Alacqua Vineyards, which was not too far from Tallahassee,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that area, which could support viniculture. But yeah, muscadine is kind of a southern grape, right? So yeah,
Yes.
interesting about Alabama. I wouldn't even have known Alabama. It's kind of funny making wine, but yeah, that's what I mean. You have to be open-minded to try these kind of things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Well,
So why
David.
don't you? I was just going to say. So why don't you give me a little background, or give us a little background? How'd you get started, and what
sure,
turned you on to
sure,
this?
sure.
And
It's a long story, but my initial wine. I'm from Boston area, but I went to school in Florida. I went to FIU. I graduated from FIU in Miami in 1980, so I was a history political science major, not having anything to do with wine or not even coming from a wine family background. My parents really didn't drink wine either, so I was kind of like out of my own. But when I wanted to go back to Boston, and I would go back every summer. And when I graduated in 1980, I had an extended stay in Boston. And basically I was looking for work, looking for a job. And we all drank beer in those days too. 1980, I was drinking, beer. I wasn't really drinking a lot of wine. But one day it's kind of funny. I bought a bottle of a rosé from France, and it was a cheap bottle. I think it was Nectar Rosé or whatever it was. And when I tasted the wine, I said, "Wow, this is actually delicious. I really enjoy this." And so I was, looking through the Boston Globe or whatever for jobs, and there was actually a job advertised there that said, wine job, no wine experience. And I said, I'll give these people a call and I'll try it. So I started, that's how I started in the Boston area. But I was gradually more, for whatever reason, I wanted to get more out of another job. And I had a friend who had told me that one of his family, his father-in-law, knew one of the biggest wine companies in Boston. And he said, if you're interested, I will see if I can get you a hookup with the owner of the company. And at that time, that company was called Classic Wines. Now, Classic was one of the top wine importers in the whole of the Boston area. They were the original importers of Gigal, Rhone wines. Yeah, they had an extensive
Wow.
book. So, and of course, at that time, I really didn't know that much about wine. And it was kind of just a student of wines, just learning. So he told me at the time, the guy said, Bert Miller, I never forget this name, had told me, I don't really have a job working in the wine distribution end, but I just bought another company with a partner in downtown Boston. It was actually in the Prudential Center. I don't know if you know Boston, but the Pru is like the biggest building in Boston. And there was a wine store there, and so I interviewed for this job, and I got that was my first serious, what I would call a serious wine job. And the reason why I say that was because I could not deal with the clientele coming through the door. I was kind of I had to learn. I had to learn, and actually they told me here's a book. They gave me the Hugh Johnson wine book,
Hmm.
which was this big gigantic book, and I was like, wow, this is an incredible book. And it was the owner owned the book, so he gave me this book and to read and study up on, and at that time. There was really not many California wines. I mean, we're talking 1980, 1981. So California was just really getting its mojo started. So this store, this traditional wine store, was selling mostly French wines, German wines at that time were very fashionable, by the way. And the other thing, Italian wines, because
Hmm.
Boston has a big ethnic, Italian population there. But just to learn about Bordeaux, I didn't really know much about Bordeaux, but people would come into the store and and say, I'm looking for Lafitte or I'm looking for, Ducru or something. So it was a very
Hmm.
seasoned kind of, even in Boston at that time, people knew about Bordeaux wine, Burgundy wine. This one gentleman that actually worked at the store graduated from MIT, and he, very bright. He belonged to the Harvard Wine Club, the MIT Wine Club, the Boston University Wine Club. Yeah, these were serious wine clubs, and he took notes on in Burgundy, and they were drinking back in those days. Burgundy was a big thing too.
Hmm.
So it was kind of an interesting learning curve for me. But for whatever reason, I didn't I wasn't happy in Boston at the time. I didn't like snow. And here I was living in Florida, going to school in Florida, living in the South Florida area, Miami, because FIU's in Miami. And of course, I just got used to, really nice weather. So when the first snowstorm happened in Boston, I was depressed. I was very unhappy. I told my parents, I said, I'm not happy here. My mother and father said, why don't you come back to Florida? And it wasn't a permanent stay anyway, because I just was going up there for the summer, but it was an extended
Hmm.
summer stay. And but I all of a sudden I had the taste for the wine. But the owner of the company, and I gave my 2 weeks notice to the chap that owned the business, and I said, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice. He said, oh, why? Why are you leaving? And I said, well, I'm going back to Florida. And he said, Florida? Why are you going somewhere where they drink Gallo wine and it's controlled by a company called Southern Wine and Spirits? And why would you want to give up such a promising career from Boston, going to a place where nobody cares about wine? And I was kind of like, well, maybe I'll educate them. That's exactly what I told them at that time. And of course, I had this knowledge, so I was going, to Florida, and then I was looking for a job. I looked up in the phone book, wine job, because I said, hey, this wine gig could be something interesting. And I found, so I was, started with A, and I looked in the yellow pages at that time. Remember, they had the yellow
Hmm.
pages. And the
Hmm.
first thing I see, Austrian cellar wines.
Okay.
And I had just gotten back from a trip in Europe. My mother and I went through like an 8 country tour in like 10 days, because my mother was British. So my grandparents actually lived in outside of London. And so we went on this tour and we went to Austria, and I thought that the most beautiful country. And I got this when they said Austria, oh, Austrian wine. Okay, maybe I can, introduce myself. And I picked up the phone, called the company. A woman was running, it was a family business. And she said, yeah, we're actually looking for a wine salesman if you want to come down. It was in Fort Lauderdale. So I interviewed for the job. And of course, I really learned fast about Gruner Veltliner and Blauer
Hmm.
and all these Austrian wines. But come to find out, when I went out to sell the wines, nobody wanted to buy those wines.
Right.
So it was really, really difficult. So it just so happened though that company at that time, and the company was from Vienna, And the owner of the company was a very wealthy Austrian businessman, and they started this company with the intent of selling Austrian wines all over the United States. It wasn't just a Florida gig, but not too successful. And they really, hit a wall with the Austrian wines. So I went from a salesman to the general manager, and then they wanted to move to Texas, the family, and they wanted to know if I would run the company in Florida. So I was kind of like, okay, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like 20, 22, 23 years old at the time, believe it or not.
Wow.
And then they called me up, and then they wanted to know, they said, look, we kind of pulling our roots up in Florida. We would like to know if you'd like to buy the company.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, yes. So I went to my mother and father at the time, and I said, then their last name was Kundal. I said, the Kundal family would like to know if I'm interested in buying, the company. My parents are looking at me like, do you know how to run a wine company? And I said, I think so. I think I can do it. I said, I don't want just Austrian wine, I want to just build a real company, and we didn't have a lot of money to start with. And my mother was really good in business because she was in work for banks and, finance companies. So she knew her stuff. So we ended up negotiating the buyout of that company. And I changed the company from Austrian Cellar Wines to Kohl International after my name. And I thought, okay, here we are. I gotta start somewhere.
Right.
So
Hmm.
that was
Wow.
1983, believe it or not,
Wow.
was when I first
Wow.
incorporated I guess that's my first company, yeah, 1983. And at that time, of course, I had all this Austrian wine inventory, so
Hmm.
I had to kind of like get rid of it because I wasn't going to buy it again. So it was kind of like a
Right.
shot deal. And they actually had beer too, believe it or not. So the only thing
Okay.
they were selling at that time was beer, and it was Dortmunder Union beer from Germany. That was so I became an importer at bringing beer in, and then I decided, I want to expand my horizons. And I met this one guy who said, Italian wines are really up and coming at that time, and I didn't really, think that way. But he put me in contact with a company called Vinifera. I don't know. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this company. Vinifera is one of the top Italian wine companies in the United States. They're based out here in New York now. But I started with them as a distributor, and then I was bringing in the Italian wines, and I went out and I started expanding. I say it's a
Hmm.
long story because it is a long story about
Well,
that, but it's actually, how I started. And, I was a rookie, obviously. I wasn't like a person that, came from a wine import background or even, had any visions of even doing this kind of business. But it kind of grabbed me. And then, of course, that's where Southern Wine and Spirits was based, and that guy was absolutely right. So, I don't think people at the beginning took me too serious, young guy out there. You're mentioning that you had three wines, it's like
hmm.
it's kind of like people don't take you too serious when you have a one-page
Yep.
book when you're going up against a company that has like a catalog.
Right.
So, and but you have to start somewhere, and it's kind of where I was at starting. And but I brought in Barolos, so I had Aldo Conterno Barolo, I had Giuseppe Rinaldi. I had some really, really great wines from this guy. And it was not too difficult for me to go into the top wine stores, especially in Miami, introduce myself. And they said, "What are you selling?" And I said, "I have Italian wine. What do you have?" And I said, "Oh, I have Aldo Conterno. I have Cadel Bosco Franciacorta." I had
Hmm.
I had some interesting wines because back in those days, nobody knew those wines.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
nobody really. And Barolo, I was selling at that time like 25, $30 wholesale.
What?
Yes, and today Aldo Conterno, you're lucky if you can buy a retail for 200 something dollars.
Yep.
Shows you the differences in the prices. But and then I started with some California wine too. So I went out to California and I started with some smaller vineyards out there, and I kind of built that book. And again, now I wasn't even involved with French wines.
Hmm.
But and then I got hooked up with some other importers. I had people that were looking for distribution. So I got involved with Kermit Lynch Imports. I don't know if you've ever heard of
Yep.
Kermit Lynch, but
Oh yeah.
I was Kermit Lynch's distributor at that time, and you know he had some interesting wines as well.
Yeah.
So I started on that route. I wasn't even importing wine at that time. I was just buying from other importers and developing brands. But then I started to travel. So I hopped the plane. I went to Vinexpo in Bordeaux at that time
Hmm.
in 1990. That was the first year I was in France. And that really opened my eyes. I don't know if you've all ever been to you know, these wine fairs, especially Vinexpo is huge, you know, and you
Hmm.
these big eyes, you know, like you're like, oh my God. And it's not just French wines, they had wines from all over the world. But then, you know, I had an importer's license anyway, so I started importing wine, and that's when I really got heavy into it, into Bordeaux, Burgundy, Rhone, you know, Loire Valley, you know, and at that day and at that time, I thought I was kind of ahead of the curve too, because I thought that that was kind of important to bring in wines. And I would go to retail stores, and you know, I would say, "Hey, I have this Bordeaux, you know, Bordeaux Superior, taste it." And a client would say, "Wow, this is really good. How much is this wine?" And I'd say, "About $7." And they said, $7? And I said, "Oh shit, $10." Because again, I was just pricing it as a, you know, a normal person would import a wine, not realizing that, you know, at the same time, I thought about that and I thought, you know, if I can be of use though to a retailer where he can make money, I don't care how much this guy's making. If he buys
Right.
it for $7 and wants to keystone it at 14, who am I to say no?
Right.
You
Right.
know? And so I learned a lot about the trade and the business and everything at that time. But you know, but it's you know, but at the same time, I was doing California business. So I had close to 15 wineries in California. I had Flora Springs in Napa Valley, Girard Winery. You know, I had Havens Vineyard, Hannah. I had a lot of wines. I'm from Monterey to Amador County. I was bringing Zinfandel in. You know, you guys love Zin, right? I was bringing
Hmm.
Amador County Zin. So I had all these wineries. So, but one of my wineries one day, it was kind of funny because I said, you know, I was in Bordeaux and I started importing wines. So one of my Napa Valley producers said to me, he said, "Oh, rumor out here in in Napa Valley is you become a Francophile." And I was kind of like, "Well, I don't know where you got that information, but I'm become a businessman." And I said,
Mm.
"I think that that's a little more what you should say. It's not if I can make money selling French wines, it pays my bills. It pays me
Right.
the luxury of buying wine from you."
Yes.
Yep.
So you know, so I think a lot of these guys at that time, you know, they would just wanted you to sell their California wine. They didn't want you to like, you know, bar the French, you know, right? They had
Yeah.
like knock against Napa, and you know, and Napa had a knock against Bordeaux because that was their rival, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
And but you know, but at the same time, yeah, I had to develop a company model, and I found myself making more money importing wine than distributing Napa Valley wines, which were expensive anyway. They were expensive at
Right.
the time, and they still are expensive. You know, I mean, come on, I mean, 150, $200 for a Napa cab, and I can sell Bordeaux for 30, $40, and
Right.
and I think that they're, you know, I think that you know it's the value today, and I sell value. I sell that to everybody. I'm always looking for value in wine, wine that over delivers. You know, anybody can buy
Hmm.
an expensive bottle of wine and say, "Hey, it's great,"
Yeah.
but how do you sell it? You
Yeah.
know, because there's a limited market, right? I mean, there's only so many people that are going to buy 200, $300 bottles, I guess, and then they're all looking for reviews, right? That's the most important thing as well. But yeah, that's kind of where my passion became. And then through all these experiences, I became more into wine. But one of the things that I also got involved with was Bordeaux wine, where you would buy futures. And actually, I
Hmm.
did. I actually merged with a French guy in Bordeaux, and we started a company together. And we were bringing in Grand Cru Class A into Florida, and everything from Mouton to Margaux to Lafite to Leoville Lascasta. I mean, top level wine. But we were buying it en premier, like first
Hmm.
tranche, and that was back in 98, 99, 2000 vintage. 2000 was an incredible year in Bordeaux. So it was a very fast way to do $1 million in sales because when you're dealing in, high level, high price Napa, I'm not Napa, Bordeaux wine, um, you know, just do the math. If you sell 10 cases of Lafite, it adds up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I was like, whoa, this is interesting business. But that's a very heavily involved cash business too.
Very cash intensive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wine in general is very cash intensive, whether you're growing the grapes, making the wine, or selling the wine. Every level is very cash intensive.
absolutely.
Capital. And the the business cycle is one that is one that you have to learn very quick. Otherwise, you're going to sink the ship as soon as you start it. Because if you're blowing through your cash and then you hit January 15th, for example, right after the holidays, you're starving if you don't put it away for a little bit. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's interesting about Florida because it was, our season down there because it was, obviously your big retail time was September through December, as you say. January hits and then there's a lull, right? It's
Yep.
completely dead. But in Florida, it became the tourist season. So you had,
Okay.
February, March, and April, and into May. You had, South Florida especially was booming. Restaurants were packed. But when the summer came, those restaurants were empty. So you're right. How do you survive? Because
Right.
you've got to, it's like mirrors. You got to say,
Yep.
how am I going to make this work? And hit your cash flow. And so you just have to time everything perfectly where your inventory, what you're doing, as far as rotation,
Hmm.
and especially if you're importing wine, it takes time to get. So you've got like a 2 month window, a 3 month window of bringing the goods in. So everything has to be organized, structured. Yeah, it's definitely a learning curve. If you don't know these kind of things, you're going to make mistakes,
Hmm.
and trust me, I made mistakes. I mean, like everybody, you learn your craft, you learn what you do, but yeah, I mean, that's an important tool. And I try to find younger people today and try to help them. In fact, I meet some people who are young Psalms right now, and they said, I would like to do what you do.
Hmm.
I said, well, it's not an easy gig, and to go from restaurants or Psalm in a restaurant and to go out there and try to sell wine to stores and everything, that's a different world.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the competition is, especially today, thick, saturated in some places, and it's not all based on quality. It's based on price point. A lot of the spaces that I see, and it tends to uh, blur the lines of what people are looking for often. So I'm interested to see this transition period we're in and how we come out on the other end. What I mean is, this dip in alcohol, adult beverage purchases from the consumer in general, and finding this window of opportunity of, okay, now we've got all the crap out of here, the 9.99 I won't name any brands, but I know you know who I'm talking about. And again, begin to develop a more mature wine population that can appreciate each glass as opposed to what we're sludging through right now. So there's a lot of opportunity, but a lot of tumultuous roads that are going to be in the way first before we get to the other side.
Yeah, I don't know about, your area, Michigan, Detroit, but here, the restaurants are doing fairly well. The retailers are the ones that are really suffering because they're not getting walk-in traffic as much. And like you say, a lot of people are not, are taking a hiatus from alcohol. They're not, they're
Mhm.
just kind of like either, stopping drinking alcohol or limiting their drinking habits or things like that. But at the same time, you go into restaurants here, especially in New York, and they're packed with people. They're busy. So we have a lot of interesting wine bars in New York City. I was in a really top level wine bar about 3 weeks ago, and I was introduced by a friend of mine, actually, this guy Jameson that I met, who's a Somm, and he said that he knew this woman who, and it's called Somm time, so they're all Somms, and
Mhm.
so I told I told this guy that I said, I'm just going to bring a few wines, just to kind of see what the, overall market is with this place. And I actually, I brought some Burgundy. I bought a couple of interesting wines. I have a wine from Savoie. I don't know if you know this area
Mhm.
here. Um, People are drinking white wine now in New York, because it's hot,
Mhm.
so they're looking for white. So I had a wine from Gaillac, and a lot of people don't know the region of Gaillac, which is in southwest France. And so I brought this wine, and the woman tasted the wine, and she's like, "Oh, this is terrific. How much is this wine?" And I said, "I have a deal on it, like $10." She said, $10. Like that. And I said, "Yeah." And I said, it's one of the best value wines in all of France because it flies under the radar. And she was so happy, that she told me, she said, I haven't had a set of wines like this, a tasting like this in a long time. And I kind of like thought she was joking. I said, come on, we're in New York. You mean to tell me you haven't had other salespeople? She said, well, I've tasted a lot of junk, to tell you the truth. I haven't really
Mhm.
tasted, and these are classical wines, and I miss classical wines, classical French wines, the ones that I'm importing. And I just thought that, I said, maybe this is coming back, where people are really interested in learning about wines, especially wine bars, where
Mhm.
people can actually taste a wine, and so I sold her 3 cases of wine. She sold out in a week. She
Good
sold out in a
job.
week. Yeah, which is like, okay, that tells me something. That tells me that people are interested in learning and, and which it was kind of invigorating for me because, we can get a little down on the trade, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, where's it going? Where's it heading? What are we doing? And that really, it really, gave me a little bit of a jolt to say, I'm not spending enough time out there, visiting some of these are like, especially wine bars, because maybe there's opportunities. And with the tariffs came in, that really hurt. The market, and I talk about this all the time that the tariffs were the worst timing mechanisms because it wasn't just the downturn of alcohol. The tariffs hurt because it pushed prices up. The
Mhm.
exchange rate in Europe, was,
Mhm.
and I know the California people probably thought that was going to help them. It didn't really. I mean, they were priced too high in the beginning anyway. So, and what really was surprising that you can still find value in France. I can buy wine in France for €4, €5 that are delicious wine.
Amazing.
They're
Yep.
just absolutely delicious wines, and they're food friendly. And of course, when you go to these wine bars, they're selling, little finger foods and things like that.
Mhm.
It's not like they're selling steak and, and all these other things. So that market is actually on an upturn in New York. You're seeing a lot more wine bars opening up, and they're really kind of cool bars too. So when people go in there, it's kind of a hangout place, but it's a learning where people can actually learn about wine. And
Yeah, that liquid to lips solution is one of the biggest tools that we have to our trade. Being able to share the actual taste of the wine instead of people traditionally going through the grocery aisle and just picking it by the label means a
right,
big difference. It also helps to have that young woman excited about the wine. That's what we see in the tasting room all the time. Is that if someone is excited about one of the wines, they're going to sell it. They're going to talk about it. They're going to sell it to anybody that's standing in front of them, and that is very very important to have that buy-in from that conduit between the producer and the consumer. And so
absolutely.
it's a
It's
very
kind of
important
cool
piece of that.
too when you go to these wine bars, because I go to New York City, and I hook up with my wife there. We'll have dinner somewhere, or I'll go to a wine bar. If I do go to a wine bar, they'll give you a little taste of the wine.
Hmm.
You're not even, it's not a wine you haven't selected yet. They say, they just give you a little taste, and you're like, oh yeah, this is delicious. Sign me up.
Yep.
And where can you go that? Where can you do that? I mean,
Right.
most restaurants would never really do that. And of course,
Right.
retailers, unless you're going to a wine tasting, at the store. But if you've never had a wine and you're curious about it, it's interesting to give a little taste. So yeah, I think the wine bars concept, it's always been there. I mean, I was selling to wine bars 20 years ago, but I think it went through a little bit of a no, of like a rut, and now you're
Hmm.
starting to see more interest, and they're also doing cocktails too. So it's cocktails, it's wine,
Right.
uh, different beers, so it's kind of a great concept. But they're all packed here in New York City, and that's the good news, is that if you're seeing people that are still embracing wine, not all is lost, is my point.
Hmm.
you know,
No,
and
Yeah.
I want to bring up the fact that I found you, David, basically on your post on LinkedIn, but then I found you uh, on a number of other social media platforms. What got you into doing the social media shorts?
Oh, very good question. I started that in Florida, actually, well over 10 years ago. And but I was really just doing it in a small little way. And the funny thing of it is, I would just kind of zero in on a bottle, but I wouldn't show who I was. It wasn't something that I would show the camera and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And at the same time, we moved to New York 9 years ago, and I had this one guy who wanted to do, I showed him a couple of videos, and he said, "Yeah, that's a great idea. Why don't we do something together?" And we started it, and but it hit a couple of bumps, and then my wife said, "You know something? Well, these people are taking too long." So she went out. We went out and started on, and she would hold the phone and I would talk, and we just kind of started, back again. I think that was about 4 years ago, and I decided to do the maps. Where so I have my mother-in-law was so kind. She bought me this maps of the world, wine world. And so we got them, laminated to make them like hard. So I refer to the map and I go like I'll show Bordeaux and I'll show Burgundy, and then all of a sudden that started to take off. People said, "Geez, you're like the professor of wines or whatever you're doing." And I wasn't trying to come along that way. I was just trying to educate people, because even in Florida, I would do a lot of wine classes, at different places. I would advertise, a wine class in Bordeaux, left bank, right bank. I would do Loire. I would do Italy, the wines of Italy, the wines of Germany, and it wouldn't just be French. It would be, I even do California, because, people don't know Santa Lucia Highlands. They don't know some of these other areas that are emerging AVAs. And So that it's kind of taken on its own little life of its own, kind of in its own way, because we kind of graduated out of that, out of doing it in, like a format where I would be in the kitchen just talking about wine. And my wife always, kind of knew it when we did Instagram. She said, you have to be under a certain time to show on Instagram, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So it's got to be fast, underneath 3 minutes. And then we started doing these kind of clips in YouTube. And then if you keep under 3 minutes, YouTube, if they accept it, they will promote it. And you don't have to spend any money promoting your own thing. You can do that too. You can spend money. I mean, people, obviously spend money to get their traffic, coming to their YouTube site. But now we're starting to do restaurants where we will go into a restaurant. We were in Paris, we were in Washington State. We were in New York here, and I'll find a wine on the list and buy the bottle and show the food that I'm having, and that is starting to take on a life of its own either because I'm doing wine and food pairing, which, it's not just all about the wine. It's okay, what do we do with this wine? How do we pair the wine? Because I think that is the biggest learning curve as well for people to learn about wine and food, how to look at a wine list in a restaurant, how to search for value on a wine list. If you don't know wine, people usually gravitate towards the wine they've heard of, right? So they become very like, unless they have somebody steering them that way. So that kind of took on a little bit of momentum. And yeah, I'm quite proud of the response that we've gotten. We're up to 40, we're closing in at 42,000 YouTube subscribers. We have well over
Whoa.
10,000. Yeah. Yeah, 42,000. And we've got well over 600 videos, 600, 700. I've got an Apple podcast too. And the interesting thing about it, because my wife is the one that does all the social media. She does the LinkedIn every morning. She posts to LinkedIn. She does the Instagram. She does the YouTube. I'm not worthy. I just do my thing, and she's definitely a rock star with that. But the interesting thing is she looks at the analytics, and we have countries all over the world watching our videos, which is we have people from Argentina, people from Portugal, people from Spain, people from Ukraine, people from
Hmm.
England, France, not just America.
Right.
It's kind of taken on a little bit of its own little life. I mean, I have people in Asia, Philippines, this thing, that thing. So it's kind of cool, to see that kind of evolve, where it's becoming like a global kind of a thing as well as just and I really didn't plan it that way. It's just it was kind of a unique thing, but I'm always I'm not at a loss for content. I'm always
Hmm.
finding content for me is easy to find. Some people might have difficulty finding content, because what's the next story that you want to tell? So, I now I've got we're gonna do some filming this weekend, my wife and I on Sunday. So we're gonna usually try to do two or three. I don't want to do any more than that because it gets a little watered down for me to spend the time and do it because I like to do research on the wines or research on the area, historical perspectives. It's important for me. I was a history major, so I bring up history, uh,
Hmm.
but I'm also touching cultural aspects of different areas too. And then when we go to France, because we were in France in February, we went on a trip and we were in Paris, so we did a lot of restaurants and wine bars in Paris. Where we would talk about, hey, if you're in Paris, go to this place, go to that place. So that's why it's taking on a little different thing. We're going to be in California in Labor Day, so we're going to be in Santa Rosa.
Hmm.
So we're going to be there for the week, and we're going to go to Napa, and I'm going to do some videos from Napa, from Sonoma. Spend some time doing that. Give them some loving too, give California some love.
Yeah.
And we were in
There's
Washington State this past year, so I was doing Washington State wines, which I love too.
so do you still represent brands, David? Do you
Yes.
still
Yeah, so
and do you,
so right now, yeah, that's why it's a long kind of discussion for me to tell you. So yes, right now I have a company with a partner. It's called Chateau and Estates, and we import close to 25, 30 properties in France. So we have
okay?
Bordeaux, Burgundy, Rhone, Languedoc, Loire Valley. I'm also a an agent representing producers in France to
Mhm.
sell directly to importers as well. That's a whole other company that I have. I'm also involved with another guy doing Bordeaux wine investments. So we started that in 2019, and which is that's I love that business too. So we were buying 2019, 2020, 2022, and now we're active in the 25 vintage. So, but we're
Mhm.
not buying as much this year, 25 because 22 was really great. But yeah, that's a whole nother company that we're doing. It's called Direct Wine Domains. And I have
And
another partner that's involved with that, and we've raised well over a half a million in that business. So it's because as you know, it's Margot, Mouton, Lafitte, and Aubryon that
mhm.
was up, you know.
Do you so do you it feels like that you are not necessarily looking for your brands when you go to these restaurants. You're just looking for wine. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, and
Or
well,
are,
that
do you
that I might have had a past with.
okay.
Yeah, because we went to a restaurant the other day, a French restaurant. Looking down the list, there was a Bandol called Mas de la Rouvier, which I used to. I had a French partner. We were importing the wine in Florida at that time. Now that wine is being brought by somebody else here. So, but at the same time, I know the wine, I know the producer, and I'm very happy to, pitch the wine and, I don't talk about the importer, but I
Sure.
just talk about Master Larouvier and it's so funny because I was having duck à l'orange, and I said, well, what are people doing in the south of France, in the summer with duck? Well, they're having rosé.
Mhm.
So it was just that kind of content. I just come up with that at the restaurant. I don't plan that in advance. I'm just looking through the list. I'm seeing something, we did a Brunello producer the other day that I had some interest in, and yeah, it's just kind of that's the content. I look at the menu. I try to see what's interesting in the menu, and then I pair the wine with the food, and then we just kind of showcase that. So that's kind of an interesting end of that business because we did a video in Brooklyn. Now this is different. We went to a client that had bought wine from us. It was actually a white wine from the Périgord region in France. It's a Sauvignon Blanc that this Italian restaurant was pouring by the glass. Believe it or not, a French wine pouring by the glass.
Hmm.
Crossover wine, we call it, right? And so I had ordered from them a what was it, chicken franchise or something like that, and I paired the wine that we sold to the guy, and
Mhm.
as like a pitch, to try to help him, and I told him I was going to do that. And he said, "Oh, that's wonderful." That video got close to 15,000 views in 2 days.
My goodness.
Wow.
You are
It's crazy. And now it's up to 20,000 views. And it was, but that's a wine that we sell. And so we
mhm.
showed the label, it's got a black truffle on the wine because Perigord is very famous for black truffles. So, and but yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. Now, yes, now that's our own wine. We were
Yep.
obviously pitching our own brand to, hey, come into this restaurant here and have this wine with this dish, and you are going to have a great meal or a great time. And that was one concept, and I've done that before too, but no, it doesn't always work out that I'm selling wine to the restaurant. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I was, and you answered the question. I was wondering if you are strategically planning these sessions to represent your brands, or if it's more. It sounds like it's just more organic, just
Well,
kind
no,
of,
no,
hey, that's great.
I'm trying. No, it's a good point because when I talk to the manager, I give him my card, which is my
Hmm.
social media card, and I told them I'm putting this wine on my social media. By the way, I'm also an importer of wine. And
Ah.
and if you're interested, I can send you my catalog. Sure, that's another pitch.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So
No, it's always,
it works because you're helping them anyway.
yeah.
And a lot of these restaurants already have a social media thing, so they hook up with theirs, and
Hmm.
so that's another, like you say, it's another, opportunity that you have with the manager or the wine person or the owner of that restaurant. You're having an interaction with them in a friendly way. And it's, oh, by the way, I'm also an importer of wine.
Instant value.
I noticed that you could use a couple of Bordeaux. So so yeah, all these are learning things that I've kind of like I incorporated with all these kind of years.
Oh, looks like you froze, David.
There because a lot of times they don't even pay attention to you. They're like, "Who are you? What do you want?"
Yeah.
You got to make an
I'm
appointment.
busy. Yeah, right. I make an appointment and I'm not going to be there when you show up.
No, but if
I've
you
had
don't,
that.
yeah, but if you go to dinner, you're spending money at their restaurant.
Absolutely.
It's not
Yeah.
like they can say no.
Right.
So, but yeah, that does help to do that too. So yeah, all of this all plays into what I'm trying to do.
That
In the business. Yeah.
it's a very big lesson for the viewers out there, guys, because
Yeah.
here's the moral of the story. I'm in the wine business. I graduated with a humanities degree. People said I would never get a job with it or be successful. Our friend David here had a history degree, I believe he said,
Yeah. Where do you take that?
and so this just goes to show you that if there's a will, there's a way, and if you love what you do, you're going to be able to do it for a long time.
Yeah.
I,
There's a lot to that.
I agree with that. That's very well spoken because we don't know when you're in college, you don't know 100% of your path. Yeah, everybody kind of predicts, that's what you're going to do, but you also don't know, I didn't know that I actually had the talent to smell and taste wine when I'm in college. So how would I know that?
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, I can blind taste wines, like a sommelier, can identify grapes and everything like that. Because even when I go to Bordeaux, sometimes I'm tasting 300 or 400 wines in a day. So,
Hmm.
the more wines, the more experience you have tasting wine, the more your senses, olfactory, your perception of wine, you do have to taste a lot of wine. I mean, and again, it's that's all part of our business, right? I mean, we have to be able to translate and explain the wine to the client. And that separates you from like a person who's a salesperson. It's just like an order taker. Should we say?
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's okay. You can be an order taker. You can say, how many cases of Jordan do you want today? Or how many,
Right. Yeah.
which is like that's okay. I mean, that's all part of the gig and the trade. But to sell something that nobody ever heard of and try to explain the wine and talk about the wine in a explain the flavor profile, the minerality of the wine. This wine is grown in limestone soil, so when you taste that bracing acidity, that's like shoots a lightning bolt through that wine and gives it that beautiful structure. You have to be able to do that to sell, I think, wine, right? I mean,
Hmm. Absolutely. It's 100%. So here's a big question. Whose wine in Michigan have you tasted, David?
whose wine have I tasted? I don't remember the actual wine that I tasted. I tasted a couple. I actually did a video on the wine and I posted it. I think it was either a Gruner Veltliner, but the funny thing of it is, so we stayed in Ann Arbor and we
Hmm.
went to Zingerman's Deli.
Oh
Oh.
yeah.
I had to go have a Reuben.
Oh.
Hmm.
And so, but what I did was I paired the Reuben with a Michigan white wine as because it's like what wine would you pair with a Reuben? Think about it.
Hmm.
It's
With the
kind of
kraut.
odd.
Yeah.
The crowd. Yeah.
It's the crowd. You got the Thousand Island dressing.
Yeah.
And so, off the top of my head, I don't know, but I sent the video to the producer and they sent back how great it was. And they said, anytime you're up in this neck of the woods, please come and visit us. So I could look it up on my phone because I do have the content in
Yeah,
my
don't trouble yourself with
No,
it. I was just wondering.
because I think I remember those posts because I think that was around the time I thought I reached out to you was when
you
you were here
probably
in
did.
Michigan and posting some stuff.
You probably did.
And
Yeah.
there's only a
Um,
few of us that grow Gruner, so it's probably you can count them all in one hand.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. So I had it was a Gewürztraminer from Bluestone Vineyards.
Oh,
Oh,
You know
yeah,
these people?
yeah,
yep.
they're over in the Leelanau Peninsula, just across the
And
bay
then
from us.
I had a spicy red wine from Michigan, a Blauer Frankirsch grape also, and a visit to Andy's Wine Bar at Lake Huron. You know this place at all?
Andy's in Lake Huron, near Lake Huron. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did a wine. I did a video there with because the owner was so nice. And we did a picnic with Spanish wine and tapas along Lake Michigan there. That got 6,400 views. That was kind of fun.
There you go.
It was like a picnic overlooking the lake, you know. So, but yeah, that was it was Gewürztraminer. And it was delicious, you know, delicious wine. But yeah, we didn't get a chance to go there because from Ann Arbor, I think that's a good 3 or 4 hours, right? I mean,
Yep.
It is. Yep.
well, another trip, next trip. I promise.
It's worth the trip. I'll tell you that. Michigan has so many diverse areas on as far as the geography is concerned. You would be surprised to see it. It reminds me of I've been to Slovenia, and so Slovenia has the Alps on one side and the Adriatic on the other, and everything in between is just an amazing experience. And you would think that you were in three different countries, but it's the size of Metro Detroit. So
Yeah, but that whole area or up there where Bluestone is, that's like the happening area too, right? That kind of,
Yep.
half of our wineries in the state. I also, for a time, I was the president of what is now known as Taste Michigan, formerly known as the Michigan Wine Collaborative, and that was our industry association. Still is our industry association. And so we have 199 active producing wineries, and I say it like that
oh,
because
it's a
there's
lot.
450 licensees in the state.
Hmm.
And about 50% of them are in the Grand Traverse Bay area, which is where our winery is. Chateau Chantal's on the old Mission AVA, and
Mhm.
Bluestone is across the water on the Leelanau Peninsula AVA.
Okay.
And what many people don't know, David, you may, but what many people don't know is that Fenville, down near Holland on the way to Chicago, was the third AVA in the United States.
Oh, did not know that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, who settled that area is specific European people from what country? Germany or who's?
Up here in
Yeah,
Traverse City.
yeah, Traverse City.
So yeah, so the Grand Traverse was settled by French, and and what ended up happening over time is that there were a lot of deeded properties after the Civil War, and a Bohemian migration of cherry farmers came north.
Mm.
And it wasn't until, I mean, Michigan has been growing grapes in Southwest Michigan for over 150 years, with a company that today is called St. Julian. But in northern Michigan, the first person credited with bringing vinifera to northern Michigan, on Old Michigan Peninsula specifically, actually, his name is Ed O'Keefe of Chateau Grand Traverse, and they specialize in Riesling. And Ed planted and was successfully growing Gamay, Chardonnay, and Riesling since the mid 70s.
Oh well.
And our winery, Chateau Chantal, is the second winery on Old Michigan Peninsula, and our grapes have been in the ground since 1986. And we grow 12 different vinifera. Um, And since then, so when I started in this business, there was 4 wineries on Old Mission and 65 wineries in the state. And now there's 12 wineries in Old Mission. There's another, I'd say probably close to 50 surrounding the Bay Area. We're on the 45th parallel, so that might give you a key on why we can grow grapes here. And we're certainly on Old Mission, 18 miles long and 3 miles wide, and so we are favorable for the maritime climate that exists here in the middle of the Grand Traverse Bay. We're finding that Pinot clones tend to do very well, and interesting selections like Gruner, Blaufränkisch. What else is Gewürztraminer is another one that's doing very well. What I think is going to be something to watch for in Michigan, though, and this is my opinion, is going to be Merlot. I think Merlot is going to find a new home in Michigan because of a lot of clay and of the maritime climate. So if you find a Michigan Merlot, you might, especially from 2024, certainly take a look at it.
My wife and I went to Julian Winery.
Mm-hmm.
Visited that winery, so we went there, and that was considered the oldest or one of the oldest, right?
They are, yeah.
Yeah. We went to their tasting room, so but yeah, it's interesting. Do you feel that you've seen climate change actually helping, your wine region there as far as, like you're saying Merlot, would that have historically been too cold to grow Merlot there?
We've been growing Merlot since '98, and we've had good years and we've had bad years. The to answer to answer your question, yes, we've had 15 of the hottest years, or excuse me, 10 of the hottest years in the past 15. 2024 was the latest of that. Before that was 2022. But with climate change, not only do we see warmer temperatures, but the piece that people aren't talking about is really how the diurnal temperature swings are causing havoc in the vineyard. And what I mean by that, Michigan State University is doing a lot of research on this right now for us. Is when you have, for example, we've had several mild November and Decembers when traditionally there used to be, a bit of snow. We used to have to get the grapes in November before it snowed. Now we have to get the grapes in November before Thanksgiving because it'll rain and dilute the chemistry in a lot of the fruit.
Right.
But what the damage is happening is that it'll be 60 degrees one day, 20 degrees the following day, 55 degrees for another 2 days, 0 degrees the day after that, 70 degrees. And so that those diurnal swings are not allowing the acclimation period for the vine to go dormant. And so what's happening is that instead of all the sap and carbohydrates coming back to the rootstock so that it can make it through the winter, it's starting to freeze and kill plants. And it's a problem. So it's a long answer to your question. I apologize. We are seeing warmer weather and growing different grapes, but we're also seeing a lot more struggles as well. A lot more, especially days like today, a lot more disease pressures with fungus and molds because of the humidity. And it's 85 today. 2 days ago, it was 60. And so there's not a whole lot that we can do about that other just learn how to deal with it. And hopefully things like things that I'm interested in learning more about are things like UV applications in the vineyard to otherwise you have to spray all the time. And a lot of technology we're hoping can mitigate a lot of these pressures. We're finding technology is going to be one of our friends. Now, if you go just 30 minutes north of us into, I don't know how familiar you are with north of us, but there's an area called Petoskey. There's an actual AVA called Tip of the Mitt. They cannot grow vinifera because it's still too cold there. So they are specializing in Marquette and Frontenac.
Hmm.
and other Chamberson, other grapes like that, Cayuga, um, because it's just 30 minutes north. It's the it's closer to the tip of the lower peninsula where the Mackinac Bridge is, where Lake Michigan meets Lake Huron, and that's just cold air blowing all the time
Yeah.
through the straits there.
But let me slide in here a minute because what I'm drinking is a red blend from Folklore,
Mm-hmm.
and it's three grapes. It's Zweigelt, Blaufränkisch, and Cab Franc,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and really nice hit of cranberry and cherry. Just a beautiful sipper. Um, so we're doing a lot of great things here all over the state.
Yeah, that's good to it's good to see. I think a lot of people don't really know Michigan wines on the East Coast here, so it's
It's
kind
true.
of it's unless you go, like you say, but it's probably a great. We actually had fun going to Michigan, so I think that I don't know, if people from New York spend time in Michigan, but I know the weather was just beautiful. I mean, when we went there. But no, they're
Well,
having
that's
some problems, with like in France, where I was there in we were there in April, and it was the warmest spring that they had. It was We were actually hot in April there. Now that I know
Mm-hmm.
that sounds kind of funny because you guys being hot in Michigan in April is like really, it's like we would love, right? We would love to be hot, but and so but that also disrupts the flowering process too,
Yeah.
So that's why right now it's they're just kind of adapting to warm weather conditions in Bordeaux, where they feel the vines have adapted to the heat. Whereas in 2003, when I was in Bordeaux one year, it was the warmest temperature in like 50 years there. Like 100-degree temperature. The vines were kind of stressed out, and
Mm-hmm.
and high alcohol, which is very unusual in Bordeaux. And now they feel that the vines have adapted themselves to the climate, which is probably going to be the same thing that happened to you. You're going to start seeing them adapt to whether, like you say, cold days, warm days, cold days, and but in Bordeaux you cannot irrigate, so they have to depend on the vine has to depend on going down into the soil, finding water, So, I mean, I don't know. And it's the soil there is not very good. It's kind of funny because when I was in Napa Valley with the producer in the 80s, he told me, this one guy in Napa, he said, we can grow anything here, you know, and the soil is fertile, and
Mm-hmm.
when you go to Bordeaux, there's vineyards there. The only thing will grow is vines. Everything else will
Mm-hmm.
die because the soil is so bad. So the vine has to penetrate rock, and get down looking for water, 30 feet, whatever it has to do to survive. And so when you're in clay soils, and you mentioned clay, clay is retains water
Mm-hmm.
over a period of time. It doesn't like absorb it. Like when you have gravel soil, the water just goes choom, right down
Right.
into it. Yeah, so that will help Merlot if it's clay. Just kind of give it some water, for the vine. During the warm days, right? If it's hot
Mm-hmm.
days, the vine has to kind of survive on its own, right? Looking for water.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
not like you can water it every day, right? It's like,
yeah.
We cannot. But
yeah,
there's a reason why it's been around for 9,000 years. That grapevine
that's
seems to
true.
find a way.
Yeah, they find a way. They do that. The vines find a way. Yeah. That's what makes it so beautiful. I mean, it's when you look at, the evolution of wine too, the especially in France, and in California, I'm assuming in Michigan too, a lot of it was the Benedictines, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
Franciscans, because they were monasteries. They were the ones, the original guys planting grapes in France and in Burgundy. It wasn't commercial business
Mm-hmm.
there in those days. And they were like botanists. They were into growing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, that passion for growing things is definitely because grape growing, it's like you say, it's like a science.
Hmm.
You have to figure it out, right? You got to figure out what's because otherwise you're getting the rot, you're getting the mold, you're getting mildew, you're getting all pests. Now with organics coming in, you got to figure out the organics because sometimes it's not good to be 100% organic because, right? I mean, if you get
Yeah.
a lot of rain, what happens? Right? I mean, you have to
Right.
keep feeding, organic's expensive to
Hmm.
do, but and that's another thing right now that's becoming more important. People are getting all very much into organic farming, sustainable farming. They want to know that the grapes are, I talk to a lot of retailers here, and they love the fact that if I tell them a producer I have in Bordeaux is 100% certified organic, although, it can't say it in America. You
Right.
can't put the French label on there because it's not according to our laws, it's according to the
Right.
EU. But it's important because it's a selling tool. And I think people are learning that, oh yeah, what I put in my body is very important now. I don't want chemicals like, people spraying Monsanto and I'm
Right.
drinking the wine. Think about 30, 40 years ago when they were spraying all the chemically treated vines in California, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we don't know what we've been putting in our body all these years. But I think people really are learning more towards that now. They want to know that, if it's organic, that's important. It's
Yeah.
important for the ecology, for for the environment and important for your body. So that's another selling tool. I'm very big into organic producers in France, and you're seeing it's cutting edge, because people in France would be the first to say organic is just not a bunch of compost in the ground. There are people who are
Right.
growing trees in vineyards now in France, and they feel that growing trees in vineyard is helping the ecosystem with the vines. So it's
Hmm.
kind of cutting edge kind of stuff. There's people who are doing pollination now with bees. That's organic. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yep.
But I do have one story to tell because I had a producer in the Rhone one time that I visited. Very very famous producer, and he was explaining organics. This was almost 20 years ago, and he was saying that he feels it's an obligation to do organics for the next generation because he said if we don't take care of the vineyards now, what are we handing over to the next generation? So he said the most important thing is you can't put chemicals in there because the birds will eat the worms that are absorbing the chemicals and bringing it back to the nest and killing the nest. And when I heard that, I said, I never really thought about it in that kind of way. And he said, well, I want to have birds in the vineyards. I don't want to, if we keep killing off the birds, the chemicals and all these other things, my children won't be able to enjoy what I've enjoyed as a child, going into the vineyard and watching birds and having part of nature. And it's very important, I think, to that kind of viticultural aspect today, right? But it is a selling tool, I think, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's very important. There's certainly a more mindful approach to all products um, in consumer today, and I think it's only going to be more precise as we move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, everything is learning now, learning curve, on wines. What's important now, you're starting to see in Europe, I don't know about you guys, and it's very expensive, is amphora. They're
Yeah.
producing wines now, and a lot of amphora are getting away from the wood, you know, uh,
Hmm.
and it's still the jury's out on this, as to how it
Yeah.
imparts flavors in the wine, But
The producer from Michigan that is in New York, if you ever come across, is Left Foot Charlie. Brian
where
Ulbrich is
where is
probably
that?
one of the best winemakers. Left Foot
Left foot
Charlie's from
Charlie.
Traverse City. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and he's been doing it for 30 years, but he is certainly a great white wine producer. He makes one red wine a year, but his Pinot Blanc and his Rieslings are second to none. And he has been doing a lot of work in the New York market. So if you
Okay.
happen to come across it, you should try it.
Left Foot Charlie. Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, listen, I think that there's opportunities, for Michigan to branch out and get out of their environment. You know,
Mhm.
I guess it just depends on the producer to get, to say, I'm determined to do that. Look at what California had to do. I mean,
Mhm.
to get out there and try to really promote California wine. And it was funny because when I first went to Vinexpo one year, they had a California section. This was 25 years ago. And one of my friends, I had a friend from Norway who was an importer in Norway, and he asked if he could chum along with me and look for some California wines. He said, "Could you help me?" I said, "Sure, I'll help you." So we go to this area with California. They must have 150, 200 California wines all opened up, and it was all the most illustrious properties. And so there was a gentleman that was behind the booth, and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I brought my friend here from Norway. He wants to learn a little bit about California wines for the Norway market." He said, "Oh," he said, "I would love to sell my wines in Norway. Why don't you come in?" And he said, "I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Warren Winarski. I own Stag's Leap Wine Cellars." And so I told my friend from Norway, I said, if you can get the brand Stag's Leap into Norway, you don't need to go out and find anybody else.
Yeah, that's it. You're done.
And he was so
Retire.
funny. Warren Winarski, God rest his soul, he passed away. He opens up this map of Stag's Leap, and he said, "This is the Stag Leap AV. This is our vineyard here." And it was so interesting. But here they were, California trying to pitch their wines in Bordeaux. Now think about that. I mean, it's not like you're selling snow to the Eskimos. You know
Yeah.
what I
Yep.
mean?
Right.
It's not like they really need your Napa Valley wine in
Right.
Bordeaux. There's 9,000 chateau owners in Bordeaux. But at the same time, yeah, you have to really be proactive in that, and imagine it depends on probably the size of the property too, that they can actually support, sales outside, right, of Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, David, that's kind of the reason why we came up with this podcast initially, was we were sitting around brainstorming, trying to figure out how we could um, more adequately expose different areas to Michigan wine. And so um, our third gentleman down here, Ken Williams, is our screenwriter, because we were going to do a streaming series. And in that streaming series, we were going to go to all of the AVAs here in Michigan and taste different wineries, and then go into a restaurant and basically have a quote unquote wine off, where Brian would pick three, I'd pick three, the restaurant would have a dish, and then we would each try and sell one of our three wines as to why one of those three Michigan wines that either Brian or I had chosen should be on their wine list.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think he's actually been quiet. He probably thinks
And no,
he's
no,
like,
no,
no, hey, there he is.
yes,
I was
yes.
going to say, you probably think it's like, boy, these guys like to talk about wine.
No, I love it. And
Good.
being well, first of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, David. I really
Yeah,
like your
pleasure to meet you
story.
too. Yeah.
And as I'm full disclosure, I'm the novice of this whole thing when it comes to wine and wine specifically. And you guys earlier were talking about St. Julian. That was the first one I was actually introduced to, because my wife, when we first started dating, I did not drink wine at all. I was one of those guys that always drunk the spirits and like tequila, vodka, whatever, mixed drinks. So she was the person that introduced me to wine, and it was a St. Julian wine. I think it was Blue Heron or Blue
Yep.
Heron, however you say it.
Blue
That was
Heron.
my very first introduction to wine.
Hmm.
So since that time, we've been married 19 years now. So I've been introduced to a lot of different wines, but listening to you guys talk, I'm just a student. So that's why I'm sitting here like a mute per se. I'm just soaking in all the knowledge. And I was
That's
on my
great.
phone looking
Yeah.
at different things. You were talking about the Gaillac wine from France. I definitely want to try some of that. Chuck, I want to try some of the wine you were just talking about. Brian, what you were just saying about all the different environment about Michigan and how that's a challenge to winemakers here. That's something I didn't know. So every time we do these podcasts, interviews, I just learn something every time. So I just sit here as a student. But as Chuck was saying, yeah, our ultimate goal is to produce a TV show, which is something the three of us been talking about for a while now. And that's where my expertise is. I'm a screenwriter, I'm a film producer. As you're talking about your story, David, I was like, wow, doing like a documentary on yourself. I mean, I think that'd be a very cool thing to do since you're so knowledgeable with what you do in the wine industry. But our goal is to produce this like a man versus food type of show where Brian and Chuck are they are the talent. As Chuck was saying, going to different wineries and different areas, talk about these different wines, and then Brian and Chuck face off at a restaurant, showing up their wine knowledge, and the restaurant chooses which wine they want to have. But no, like I said, I'm just sitting here, just soaking in all the knowledge. I love it. One thing I will say, David, since you say you went to Ann Arbor, both Brian and I were Michigan State alums.
Oh,
So
okay.
I would definitely say, Brian, we can find him a wine bar in East Lansing to go to because East Lansing is a much cooler town than Ann Arbor. Go green, go white. I just want to sneak that in there. So
Well, we went to a wine bar in Ann Arbor called Vinology on Main Street.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yep. I've
Yep.
heard of analogy.
And
Yeah.
Yep.
we did a video there too because they have an event space, and it's just I was trying to help the manager out, and we had such a great time there. But what a nice town, and I'm sure it gets really hectic there when the big blue come rolling in there with their
Oh
football
yeah.
games. So
Yeah.
but at the same time, I always wanted to go. My wife and I always wanted to go to Michigan, and we said road trip, road trip. So we drove. Actually, we drove there. We went to Cleveland, and but I'd never been to that area. We had to have Detroit pizza, so we went downtown Detroit, and we
Mhm.
had I guess the original place that they did the pan pizza, right?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
trying to
yeah.
think of the name of that because I was trying to figure. I was asking people, what's the best pizza here, and of course, everybody had a different opinion. So
Yep.
Sure
Yeah.
do.
You will always have a battle right now. Buddy's is the original, but you
yes, we
got
went to Buddies. We
but
went
you
to
have
Buddies.
Cloverleaf.
Yep, we went to
Um,
Cloverleaf. That
what is
was
that? Michigan and Trumbull.
yeah.
Yeah, Pie Sci. There's a number of different Detroit pizza um,
Yeah,
makers in Detroit now that are making really great pies.
we went to Cloverleaf. That was a blast from the past place. It was kind of interesting place, right? I mean, it was right near the museum where we went. There was the
The
museums
Motown
in
Museum.
downtown. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were right. We were in that one there.
Well, Cloverleaf's history is kind of tied to, I think, Buddy's, because I think one of the guy who more or less created Cloverleaf started at Buddy's and
Okay.
basically said, I can make a better pizza. And there it is.
There
Here we are
it
today.
is. So yeah, but we had a great time. So and we got about we drove around just to learn different areas, and we went to the what was it the Motown Museum that they have there. We
Hmm.
went there,
Yep.
and that was cool. And it was good to see because I've heard that Detroit, certain areas, were just kind of the old buildings, and they really haven't renovated a lot of those areas yet. But it looks like there's a rejuvenation in this
Yeah.
Oh
in the area.
yeah,
But
big
I was
time.
amazed at the museums. We could not believe the amount of museums that were there in
Yeah.
downtown.
Yeah.
They
The
were
Institute of
beautiful.
Art, Detroit Institute of Arts
Yeah.
is I believe one of the best museums in the country that
Top
people don't
notch.
know about.
No,
Yep.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and it was just, and yeah, we really, learned a lot about the city and that I didn't know. So it was just great to meet them. But Yeah, but I wanted to go to Ann Arbor because, it's so famous, right? With Michigan, the
That's right.
big house. I
Zingerman's.
wanted to see that. I hadn't had a chance to go in the big house, but we were outside the big house and it's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but you got to go to Zingerman's. That's if I was to tell anybody to go, if you're in Ann Arbor and you got to go anywhere, you have to go to Zingerman's and do that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the food is amazing, but standing in that line.
In that line, but it's a big place. I didn't realize it. They sell a lot of stuff there too. It's
Yeah.
kind of gourmet food kind of place. But yeah, and it was fabulous because I love pastrami sandwiches. I like all that kind of stuff. So that's a bucket list place to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was funny because they came up with president's favorite sandwiches the other day. Every president's favorite sandwich, and Barack Obama said Zingerman's Deli.
No kidding.
That was his favorite sandwich in the United States. So hats off to them. That they
There we go.
Oh yeah, because his
a
daughters went
shout
to
out from the
Michigan.
president there. Huh?
Yeah, his daughters went to Michigan. I forgot about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
no
Yeah,
wonder.
Sasha was at Michigan for a minute.
Oh, of course. Now we do the math. They come and visit. Go to Zingerman's.
There you go.
Cool.
Well, thanks for your time tonight, David. I think
this
you've
has
been very
been great,
generous with
guys.
it.
Yeah, this has been great, and we'll have to figure out, on our kind of like format how we could do something to post it up too. Because I've done interviews with some friends. I do Riverside podcasts, so I've had some friends and invite some people like the state of the Argentinian industry. I have a friend in Argentina, and I did that. And we'll have to figure out how to post so we can help each other out.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Oh,
It'd be
most
fun.
definitely. Most
Yeah,
definitely.
what I'll do is when I finish editing this puppy up, I'll send it to you. But I'll also send you the links because I'll be posting it to. I'll do some shorts that'll start popping up tonight.
Cool.
On Instagram, and then the full one should be done by, I would say, by Saturday, and that'll be up on YouTube and Spotify.
Great. Perfect. Sounds like a plan. Well, it's been a pleasure, guys, and I really appreciate you invited me to talk because it's always nice to share stories. And again, we love this business, and we just want other people to. I came out with a motto. Actually, I want to show you guys this. My wife actually bought this. It's called "Make Wine Fun Again." Can you see it? Can you see the hat? Make wine fun again.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh yeah, I like that. I like that.
Well, because when I say again, and I actually told people about that, they said, "I thought wine is always fun." and I said, "Well, people right now maybe not drinking as much wine."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was
like it.
Make it fun, make it an interesting thing, and I hope we shared all that tonight.
Yes.
I certainly did.
Thank you, David. I appreciate you.
Yeah, this
I
has been
appreciate you
very
so
fun,
much.
very fun.
Have a great night, guys. Great
All
to
righty.
talk with you.
Yep.
Take care.
Take care.
Ciao.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
All right, David.